Have you ever found yourself standing in the quiet of your own mind, staring at the ghost of a past mistake? It's that moment, isn't it? The one that replays itself without invitation, often late at night when the world has gone silent and your defenses are down. It's a conversation where you said the exact wrong thing, a decision that sent your life down a path you still question, a moment of inaction that you now believe, with the full force of your being, changed everything for the worse. The memory feels so solid, so sharp and defined. You can feel the texture of the regret in your chest, a familiar, heavy weight. You trace its edges, you recite its script, you feel the heat of its shame as if it were happening right now. You are certain of what happened. You are certain of your failure. But what if you're wrong? What if that ghost that haunts you, that mistake you carry with such certainty, is itself a ghost? A phantom built not of historical fact, but of something far more malleable, far more treacherous, your own memory. What if the event you regret, in the precise way you remember it, isn't even real? I am a cognitive narrator, and my purpose is to explore the architecture of our inner worlds, to understand why our minds build these prisons of the past, and to find the key that might unlock the door. For years, I've been fascinated not by what we remember, but by how we remember. And what the science of the mind has revealed is nothing short of revolutionary. We tend to think of memory as a high-fidelity video camera, faithfully recording our experiences for later playback. But this is perhaps the single greatest misconception we have about our own minds. Memory is not a recording device. It is a storyteller. We are about to embark on an archaeological dig into the landscape of your mind. That mistake you keep returning to, that's our dig site. We've been told there is a cursed artifact buried there, something that has defined and limited us. Our culture, our intuition, everything tells us to trust the certainty of that feeling, that vivid recollection. We believe that what we unearth from our past is a perfect relic of what once was. But the truth is, every time you recall a memory, you aren't just replaying it, you are rebuilding it. In this exploration, we will use the tools of the cognitive archaeologist to examine this artifact of regret. We will look at the science of reconstructive memory, which shows that our minds piece together the past from fragments rather than retrieving a whole intact file. We will investigate the insidious power of the misinformation effect, a phenomenon where the story of our past can be contaminated by things we learn long after the event is over. And we will confront the startling reality of false memories, where our brains, with the best of intentions, can construct vivid, detailed, and emotionally resonant memories of events that simply never occurred. Finally, we will examine the engine of regret itself, a powerful cognitive distortion known as hindsight bias. This is the voice that whispers, "You should have known better," a voice that judges your past self with the knowledge and clarity that only the present can provide. It's a deeply unfair trial where the defendant, your younger self, is not allowed to speak, and the evidence has been tampered with for years. The question we are holding in our hands is not just an academic curiosity, it is a key. Because if the mistake you regret is built on a foundation of flawed, reconstructed, and perhaps even false memories, then the prison you've built around it might not have any walls at all. What if the story you've been telling yourself about your greatest failure is, in fact, one of the greatest fictions your mind has ever produced? Stay with me as we begin to dig. Let's begin our excavation at a specific site. I want you to think of a mistake, but not just any mistake. Let's focus on a social one, as these are the regrets that often haunt us with the most ferocity. Perhaps it's the end of a friendship. Think of a specific moment, a conversation, a final interaction that you have identified as the moment it all went wrong, the moment you carry. I will share a story, a composite of countless human experiences that may feel familiar. Imagine a close friendship you had a decade ago. Let's call your friend Alex. The friendship was one of those effortless ones, built on shared laughter and late-night conversations. But over time, things grew strained. There was a period of distance, of unspoken tension. Then came the final conversation. You remember it vividly. It was in a crowded, noisy coffee shop. You were feeling defensive, stressed from work, and you said something sharp, something dismissive and unfair. You can still see the look on Alex's face, a flash of hurt, then a cold shuddering. You remember the exact words you used, and they echo in your mind with a cringe-inducing clarity. "You're being overly sensitive," you said. That was it. The friendship never recovered. For 10 years, you have carried the weight of those 4 words. They are the artifact you have unearthed time and time again, the definitive proof of your failure as a friend. When you recall that moment in the coffee shop, your brain isn't pulling a single complete file from a neurological library. Instead, it's engaging in a breathtakingly complex act of reconstruction. It gathers fragments, the smell of coffee, the sting of your defensiveness, the general knowledge of how conversations like this usually go, the deep emotional ache of the loss that followed. Your brain, acting as a master storyteller, weaves these fragments together into a narrative that makes sense. It prioritizes coherence over accuracy. Think about the context you often forget. Were you sleep deprived that week? Was there a major deadline looming at your job? Was Alex also going through something you weren't fully aware of? In the initial aftermath, these details were probably present, but over a decade of retelling the story to yourself, your brain, in an effort to be efficient, streamlines the narrative. It trims away the messy, complicating details and sharpens the focus on the most emotionally resonant part, your harsh words and Alex's hurt expression. The memory becomes a caricature of the event, more potent and less nuanced with each recollection. The artifact gets polished until it gleams with the singular shine of your guilt. This process is not a flaw in our cognitive design, it's a feature. Our minds are built for meaning, not for meticulous data storage. They create stories that help us understand ourselves and our world. The story of "I messed up my friendship with Alex because I was cruel" is a simple, powerful, and instructive narrative. It serves as a warning for future behavior. But its simplicity comes at the cost of truth. The actual event was likely a chaotic mix of emotions, intentions, and external pressures from both sides. Your memory, however, has edited it into a clean, tragic morality play where you are the sole villain. Now, let's introduce our second tool, which acts as a contaminant at our archaeological site, the misinformation effect. This psychological principle, pioneered by the brilliant researcher Elizabeth Loftus, demonstrates that memories are profoundly vulnerable to contamination by information we receive after the event has occurred. In Loftus's classic studies, she showed that simply changing a single word when questioning an eyewitness about a car crash, using smashed instead of hit, for example, could alter their memory of the speed of the vehicles and even cause them to remember seeing broken glass that wasn't there. How does this apply to your friendship with Alex? The post-event information hasn't come from a manipulative lawyer, but from a source far more powerful and persistent. You. For 10 years, you have been ruminating. Rumination is the mind's echo chamber, where you replay the event over and over, analyzing it, judging it, and deepening its emotional groove. Each time you do this, you are not merely observing the memory, you are re-encoding it. Imagine that a few weeks after the fight, a mutual friend says, "Yeah, Alex mentioned you were really dismissive that day." That word, dismissive, now becomes part of the evidence. You might not have thought of yourself as dismissive at the time, maybe just stressed or distracted, but this new piece of data gets absorbed. The next time you reconstruct the memory, your brain might subtly color your own actions to align with this new label. You start to remember yourself having a dismissive posture, a condescending tone. This isn't a conscious fabrication. It's a seamless integration of new information into an old reconstruction. Perhaps a year later, you read an article about toxic friendship traits, and you see a description of gaslighting by telling someone they are too sensitive. The phrase leaps off the page. It's a perfect fit. Your brain, eager to make sense of the past, takes this new, powerful psychological concept and applies it retroactively. Now, your memory of the coffee shop isn't just a moment of insensitivity, it's a case of psychological manipulation. The guilt intensifies, the story solidifies. You weren't just a bad friend, you were a toxic one. The artifact you dug up as a simple clay pot is now relabeled as a vessel of poison. This process is subtle, happening in countless micro-updates over years. Your current beliefs, your evolving self-concept, the psychological vocabulary you acquire, all of these things act as sources of misinformation that contaminate the original memory. You are both the eyewitness and the relentless, leading questioner in the courtroom of your own mind. The memory you hold today of that conversation with Alex is a composite, a collage of the original sensory fragments and a decade's worth of emotional paint, narrative spackle, and intellectual varnish. The ghost in the machine isn't just a replay of the past, it is a continuously updated simulation, becoming more convincing, more streamlined, and often more damning with every single run. The tragedy is that we mistake this polished, edited, and contaminated final product for the raw, unvarnished truth. We have established that the artifact of our regret is not a perfect relic. It has been weathered by reconstruction and contaminated by misinformation. But this intellectual understanding often feels hollow in the face of the sheer emotional weight of the memory. It feels too real, too visceral to be a distortion. Why does this reconstructed memory hold such power over us? To answer this, we must bring two more tools to our dig site, tools that examine the very soil in which these memories are buried, our emotions and our biases. This brings us to the most radical and unsettling idea in our exploration, the concept of false memories. This isn't just about distorting details, it's about the mind's capacity to create entire, multisensory memories of events that never happened. Research has shown that through suggestion and imagination, a significant percentage of people can be led to develop detailed memories of things like being lost in a shopping mall as a child, spilling a punch bowl at a wedding, or even committing a minor crime, events that their parents confirm never occurred. These are not weak, vague feelings. They are often rich, confident recollections, complete with sensory details and emotional resonance. How does this relate to your memory of the argument with Alex? It is unlikely that the entire coffee shop meeting was a fabrication, but crucial elements of it could very well be. Let's focus on the most painful part, the look on Alex's face. You remember it as a clear, devastating flash of hurt, but was it? A crowded coffee shop is a chaotic environment filled with fleeting expressions. Is it possible that in the seconds after your comment, Alex's face showed a mix of surprise, confusion, or even frustration, which your guilt-ridden mind later reinterpreted and simplified into pure hurt? The engine of this process is often our imagination. In the weeks and months after the friendship ended, you likely spent hours imagining what-if scenarios. What if I had said something kinder? You would have pictured Alex's face softening, smiling. What if I had apologized right then? You would have imagined a look of relief. These acts of imagination are not inert fantasies. They are neurologically active events. The same brain regions light up when we vividly imagine an event as when we actually experience it. Over time, these imagined details can become woven into the fabric of the original memory, a process known as source monitoring error. Your brain remembers the image of Alex's profound hurt, but it forgets the source of that image. Was it the actual event, or was it one of the 1,000 painful simulations you ran in your mind afterward? Perhaps the most damning detail, the 4 words, "you're being overly sensitive," has become the anchor of your entire regret. But are you absolutely certain those were the exact words? Is it possible you said something more like, "I think you might be misinterpreting the situation," and your mind, in its quest for a simple, self-blaming narrative, sharpened it into the more cliché and cruel phrase? Our brains are notorious for swapping out actual details for more generic, schema-consistent ones. The phrase, "you're being too sensitive," is a classic script for invalidation, making it a prime candidate for your brain to insert into the memory to make it more narratively coherent. You may be haunted by a line you never actually delivered. The artifact is not just mislabeled, parts of it may be outright forgeries, crafted by your own mind to create a more compelling and self-flagellating story. This deepens the tragedy, but the emotional engine that drives our fixation on this potentially flawed memory is our final tool. Also known as the "I knew it all along" effect, this is the pervasive tendency to look back on a past event and believe that the outcome was easily predictable. Once we know how the story ends, the friendship is over, our minds subconsciously rewrite the past to make that ending seem inevitable. Looking back at that coffee shop conversation, you now see it as the clear, unambiguous turning point. You think to yourself, "I should have known that saying those words would end our friendship." It was so obvious. But was it? In that moment, in the heat of the conversation, did you truly know the full consequences? Or were you simply a tired, stressed human being navigating a difficult conversation with imperfect information and limited emotional resources? Hindsight bias is particularly cruel because it judges our past selves against an impossible standard. It takes the complete knowledge of the present, the knowledge of the eventual outcome, and projects it backward onto a version of you that could not possibly have had it. You are essentially blaming your past self for not being psychic. You forget the hundreds of other arguments and disagreements in your friendship that didn't end it. You forget the context, the nuance, the uncertainty of the moment. All of that complexity collapses into a single erroneous point of certainty. I should have seen it coming. This cognitive distortion is the very heart of regret. It's what transforms a simple mistake into a source of chronic shame. It fuels the belief that if you had just been smarter, wiser, or better, you could have prevented the negative outcome. This is an illusion, but a profoundly powerful one. It keeps us anchored to the dig site, forcing us to unearth the same flawed artifact again and again, each time feeling the fresh sting of a failure that we believe was entirely predictable and preventable. The weight of what if becomes unbearable because we have forgotten the fundamental truth of the past. It was once just an uncertain, unfolding present. The memory of Alex is so heavy, not just because of what happened, but because of the layers of imagined detail, false certainty, and the deeply unfair judgment of hindsight that we have packed around it for a decade. We are not just haunted by a ghost. We are haunted by a ghost we have meticulously and unconsciously helped to build. Our archaeological dig has revealed something profound. The artifact of our deepest regret, the one we believe to be a solid, immutable record of our failure, is anything but. It is a composite pieced together over time, weathered by our current emotions, and contaminated by years of rumination and biased hindsight. The very ground of our memory is unstable. This realization can be disorienting, even frightening. If I can't trust my own memory of my most significant mistakes, what can I trust? But within this uncertainty lies the seed of liberation. If our memory of the past is not a static record, but an active, ongoing story, then it means we can become something more than just haunted observers. We can become the editors. This brings us to one of the most empowering concepts in modern psychology, narrative identity. This theory suggests that we, as human beings, come to understand who we are by weaving the disparate events of our lives into an evolving, internalized story. This personal narrative is not about discovering some true self that lies buried within. It is about the active creation of a self through the stories we choose to tell. The events of our lives are the raw data, but we are the ones who give them meaning, who arrange them into a plot with themes, turning points, and character development. You are not the events that happen to you. You are the story you tell yourself about those events. For years, the story you've told about the end of your friendship with Alex has been a tragedy of your own making. It's a simple, painful story where you are the villain, the turning point was your cruel words, and the theme is your inadequacy. But based on our excavation, we now know this story is built on unreliable evidence. This doesn't mean erasing the memory or absolving yourself of all responsibility. It means recognizing that you have the right and indeed the capacity to tell a more nuanced, compassionate, and truthful story. You can shift from being the passive victim of your own narrative to its active author. So how do we begin this process of rewriting? This is not about positive affirmations or pretending the pain doesn't exist. It is about becoming a more honest and skilled curator of your own inner museum. Here is a reflective exercise, a path forward that begins with a single, crucial shift in perspective. Find a quiet moment and a piece of paper. At the top, write down the title of the old story, something like, "The Time I Destroyed My Friendship with Alex." Now, below that, we are going to act as a cognitive journalist and separate the facts from the narrative. Draw a line down the middle of the page. On the left side, write, "What I know for sure." On the right, the story I've been telling. Under "What I know for sure," be ruthlessly minimalist. What are the bare bones, verifiable facts? Alex and I were friends. Our friendship ended around 2014. We had a tense conversation in a coffee shop before we stopped speaking. I felt stressed at the time. I regret how things ended. Notice what is not on this list. The exact wording of what you said, the precise emotion on Alex's face, the belief that this single conversation was the sole cause of the rupture, or the judgment that you should have known better. These are not facts. They are elements of the story. Now, on the right side, under "The Story I've Been Telling," write it all out. Let the old narrative flow. I coldly told Alex they were being too sensitive. I saw their heart break in that moment, and it was all my fault. I was a toxic person, and I should have known that my words would be the final blow. I single-handedly ruined one of the best friendships I ever had. Once you have these two columns side by side, take a moment to truly see the difference. The left column is small, sparse, and objective. The right column is dramatic, emotional, and filled with assumptions and self-blame. For years, you have been living as if the right column were the left. You have mistaken your story about reality for reality itself. This act of separating them is the first step toward reclaiming your power as the narrator. The final step is to begin writing a new story. Not a fictional one, but a more comprehensive and compassionate one. This new narrative doesn't discard the facts on the left. It uses them as its foundation. It might sound something like this. My friendship with Alex was a meaningful part of my life that ended during a difficult period for both of us. The end was painful and likely the result of many complex factors, including distance, stress, and miscommunication from both sides. There was a final tense conversation where I know I didn't handle myself with the grace I would have wished. I regret my part in that ending, and it has taught me invaluable lessons about communication and compassion. The pain of that loss is a testament to the value of the connection we once shared, and it has informed the way I tend to my relationships today. Do you feel the shift? The guilt is transformed into regret. The self-blame is replaced with responsibility. The tragic ending becomes a source of wisdom. The artifact of regret is taken out of the display case where it was labeled "My Greatest Failure" and is moved to a new exhibit titled "Lessons in Human Connection." It's the same artifact, but the story we tell about it, the light we cast upon it, changes everything. This is not a one-time fix. It is a practice. You are retraining your brain to follow a new narrative pathway. Every time the old painful story begins to play, you can gently stop it and say, "That is the old story. That is the ghost story, and then you can begin to recite the new one, the one that is more complex, more compassionate, and ultimately more true. The purpose of understanding the science of false memories is not to induce a paranoid state where we trust nothing about our past. It is to introduce a radical sense of humility and forgiveness into our inner lives. The mistakes you regret may not be as clear-cut as you believe. The person who made them, that younger version of you, was doing the best they could with what they knew at the time, navigating a foggy present, not the crystal-clear past you now perceive. The ghost that haunts you is made of smoke and mirrors, a trick of the mind that you no longer have to fall for. You are the archaeologist, you are the curator, and you are the storyteller. The past is not a prison. It is simply a story, and you have the power to write a better one. What is a mistake you've been replaying? And what would a more compassionate, nuanced story about that moment sound like? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about rewriting our pasts together.